Hey, Emily, thanks so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Hi, Erica.
Hi. So excited to have this conversation with you. Let's just start with you telling our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Okay, the best question. My name is Emily. I am married to a wonderful human. His name is Sam.
Mm-hmm.
We've been married for almost 7 years next Monday. Crazy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So good.
Wow.
And then we have an almost 2-year-old who is in her defiancy stage of almost 2.
Terrible twos.
So sweet. Her name's Jacqueline. And yeah, for my day-to-day, loving on her, loving on him. But I also am a social worker. So I right now work at Azusa Pacific University in the Department of Social Work. And I love it, getting to empower our students that are there, not just through teaching, but advising, admissions, a lot of very fun roles I get to have.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, I worked at an organization that I love. It's called Elizabeth House in Pasadena. Worked as a program manager there with our mamas who are experiencing homelessness, either that were pregnant or newly postpartum. And it was a really unique opportunity and place to be. We think about the intersections of a lot of different things, but a lot of factors when it comes to disparities in maternal mental health and postpartum care. I learned a ton, and I think have really ignited a passion for that population, especially when we think about parenting, motherhood from different vantage points. We think about what I just got to experience, postpartum physical therapy. It's not accessible to everyone. It's not something that's standardized care. But absolutely love the work, especially that Village is doing when we think about holistic health, because it's something I'm really passionate about, and saw with our mamas, saw with even some friends as we've gotten to talk about new seasons of motherhood. So that's a little snippet, a little bit about me.
Love it.
Yeah.
Such important work.
Sweet. Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about your pregnancy with Jacqueline. Was there anything that you weren't expecting that was a little hard for you? What was it like going through that process?
Well, caveat to all this, sweet pandemic baby. So in planning pregnancy, thought, we're ready. Let's go for this. So got pregnant in December of 2019. So unexpecteds came when the world shut down in March. I think in my mind, head knowledge wise, I was I'm totally prepared, right? At the time was working for Elizabeth House, had a lot of good head knowledge about pregnancy, about stages of development, about postpartum. My mom is a labor and delivery nurse. So I grew up hearing about childbirth all the time around the dinner table, places you shouldn't hear about it. But I think when I expected pregnancy, of course it is very different no matter what when you're in it, but especially going through a pandemic, one of the biggest things that I wasn't expecting that was really hard, which some of my friends laugh at me about, but was not, it's going to sound so weird, not having my belly touched.
Really?
When you have that awkward story of the sweet auntie or grandma in the grocery store you don't know that's oh, you're pregnant, let me touch your belly. Yeah. That just didn't happen.
Some people are so weirded out by that.
Super weirded.
But you wanted that.
I maybe didn't want the stranger,
That's fair.
But it was so strange to go through a whole experience and really only feeling her kicks myself or my husband. And that was an interesting, unexpected experience. Other than that, I think something that probably a lot of women deal with is the comparison piece. So I think when we think about weight gain in pregnancy, there's you shouldn't Google that stuff, ladies. Don't do that. But there is a range that they say, right? And I was very much on that higher end of the range. So by the end, I was just uncomfortable, was over it. I jokingly took a picture at probably 39 weeks pregnant at the beach. And I was I brought my own beach ball, legitimately looked like I had a beach ball. I think those things, but other than that, I enjoyed pregnancy more or less. I was really grateful. I had a more or less easy one. So
good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Tell us about labor and delivery in the middle of the pandemic. What was that like?
August 2020. Pretty anxiety inducing. Yeah. I think in my mind, I knew I just wanted it to be my husband and I in delivery in terms of support person. But, you don't get to go to the classes in person. Everything, when you think about ways to equip and prepare. And for us at that time, we felt most comfortable with a hospital birth. And so things have changed if we think about another kiddo. But for him, that was he felt most comfortable with. And I knew, it'd be a good experience in that way, given the insurance we had, all these things. But I would say leading up to her birth, but also, actual birth, I think, unfortunately, there's just a pretty major lack in, and it's not dissing on any OBs, the wonderful humans that are OBs, but there's sometimes a lack in care and intentional care. So birthing experiencing, really grateful that we got to have the same OB that gave me my prenatal care, deliver Jacqueline. But yeah, just giving birth in a mask was not expected. Oof. Pulled it off my nose. I was like, I don't think you want me to pass out.
That would not be good.
Yeah, it was just a different experience. But I think I felt as empowered as I could be given the circumstances. Had a great support person. Went into labor really hoping to not have an epidural. Yeah. But labored for like 24 hours and said, here's the thing. Let's utilize the medicine that's here. And yeah, once we got that epidural, she was here like an hour later. So grateful for the care we received. Definitely would say there's things that I would want to change moving forward with future kid planning. But overall was grateful I got to have a vaginal delivery, even though we had to go with interventions I didn't want to have in the first part. And she came out as healthy as she could. We stayed in the hospital for exactly the 24-hour mark. That was the other thing. Straight up, they did not let you get outside food at the hospital. Man. So I think that's a funny looking back. My first meal postpartum, like right after delivering, was like hospital meatloaf and mashed potatoes and steamed carrots. You know,
yum.
Not your fave.
No.
So, but it was good overall.
Tell us a little bit about how you labored. Were you able to kind of move around? Did they give you the freedom to do things that you wanted to do? Were you restricted at all?
Really good questions. When we went in, I unfortunately was in, it's not called triage. What on earth is it called? Basically before being admitted to an actual room.
That would be triage.
Yeah, triage. Great. Maybe the size of this room, probably smaller that we're currently in, for like 4 hours. So that was rough.
Whoa.
That was real rough. Didn't love that. Once we got into the labor room, it really was just us. We didn't have a ton of support, so that was rough. People just kind of checking and monitoring heartbeat and things. But thankfully, they respected my wishes to have like a monitor that I could walk around with. So got to do a lot of pacing, got to post my mantras that I was, reading and trying to speak over myself. But yeah, a really discouraging thing, I really was counting on like some sort of birthing ball situation. The one that was provided was like incredibly deflated and they could not find the pump. So like, here's a rocking chair. And I was like, do you know?
Not the same.
Not going to help. So I would say got to move around a bit, good space, but not the kind of support I think could be provided elsewhere perhaps. So.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you would do differently? You touched on it earlier that maybe second time around you might do things differently. Touch a little bit more on that for us.
I've maybe become a little bit too much of a natural birth fanatic.
No such thing.
No such thing. I think that there is incredible support and care within California especially, but a lot of places in the United States for midwifery, for having doula support, whether it's in a combo or one isolated from the other. Would love possibly someday to have a home birth, but I think there's some pretty sweet birthing center spaces and getting to have the way I could describe it, I guess, is a more embodied birthing experience. I think sometimes when we have medical interventions, there can just be limitations to the fullness of experience, which some people would just say, you're crazy, you want to feel it all. But I think there's something to pain management in different ways if you have good support. So I think next time around would probably try to go through a birthing center and or a home birth, because I think, there's incredible research out there. There's so much that can happen within those first few hours of birth that sometimes gets swept away in the hospital setting. And if baby's healthy, mama's healthy, there's women have been doing this since the dawn of creation. Amen. We can do it. So
just giving some sense of control back to the mom.
And all that to say, right, like my mom has been a labor and delivery nurse in a hospital setting for 35 plus years. So I think I respect and honor so much what she does. Absolutely. And there's space and place for it all. But I think sometimes we have I don't know if this is a word, over medicinalized or created an experience within the hospital that doesn't inherently need to be that manufactured in birthing experiences. Yeah. So.
I think it's a big passion of a lot of pelvic floor PTs you speak to as well, with just informing patients that you have options, like hospital birth, whether or not that's what you want. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but just helping people understand a little bit more that they have options, that they can ask for certain things, that they can investigate a little bit on their own and just know what's available so that they can make an informed decision about what they want their birth to look like.
Yeah. And that's it. It's making sure, and I think that was something I valued so much being at Elizabeth House, making sure that as women, we understand there are options and you don't just have to go along with the first practitioner you see. I think that's across the board in a lot of different settings, but being empowered through the knowledge to say, great, I have these choices, I have this information, and with an informed decision, I'm moving forward.
Yep. So important. All right, let's dive into postpartum. In the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
What did you feel like your experience was like? What do you feel like helped with healing? Did you feel equipped to heal well? Get back to exercising your runner?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that journey.
That's fun. Let me think. I would say from the outset, I don't think we talk enough about immediate postpartum, both from the very physiological standpoint of it all, but especially when we think about holistically mental health wise. I think we've gotten better as a culture about talking about postpartum depression. I don't think we've gotten as good about talking about postpartum anxiety, about not just the hormones of the first 6 weeks plus, but saying, hey, beyond that, you could be in month 7 and still be experiencing a lot of that anxiety and new motherhood. So I'd say for myself, I knew head knowledge wise, like be on the lookout for these signs, you know, be aware of postpartum depression, but I didn't expect anxiety to hit me as hard as it did, even though I'd already been in a pandemic for a few months, right? It was, I think, all consuming a lot of the time. When you're a new mom, there's so much that is new. And if you have a partner that's supporting you, there's so much for them that is new, and understanding your new relationship with your partner, but also this crazy new identity that's just been cast upon you. Going back to the physiological part, I think there's really sweet companies that I think are doing a better job about dispelling this, like Freedom Mom, right? Thinking about, hey, let's talk about a peri bottle. Let's talk about really good preparation. But I wish that as women, especially, we'd get better at talking about like, hey, fully expect X, Y, and Z.
And creating more safety around having that conversation.
Yeah, so that it doesn't feel uncomfortable or awkward. I was really into, I'm going to totally not remember the author's name, which is a bummer, but there is a book called The First 40 Days that's a really sweet merging of both recipes, but also kind of this framework around with a lot of Eastern Asian cultures about the yin and yang in a body postpartum. And so this idea of consuming really a lot more nutrient dense warm foods, so bone broths or but again, just that warmth versus cold. In a lot of Taiwanese cultures, one of my cousins is Taiwanese, they call it the sitting month, where the mom is literally in the bed and everyone's bringing her things. I think so often in the United States, we rush to get back to. And I think that's sometimes, you know, there's only a 6-week traditionally pregnancy disability leave. That is insane. You are not ready at 6 weeks to be re-engaging.
France, it's a year.
Which is amazing. Like, can we all change and move? Just kidding. Love you, France. But, and there's a lot of westernized countries that it's a full year, not just for the mom, but even for the partner. I think that is huge. So not just for the physical recovery, but the acclimation and I'm really, really passionate about attachment and bonding that can happen with the baby. And even a 3-month maternity leave to be able to get back to work, I don't think is enough time. There's so much that happens. So
did you feel supported in that process? Like, what was your experience like? Did you feel a lot of pressure?
Interestingly enough, I was the first person to go on a maternity leave at Elizabeth House, which is so interesting. It's a wonderful organization. It's like 30 years old, but the ladies that work there, there'd never been someone of my, life circumstance. So I would say I did. I would say I felt supported because of a lot of factors. Remote work was still approved and a wonderful thing. So even though I went back to work at 4 months postpartum, it was fully remote until like month 7-ish, I believe. And then I went back a couple days. So I'd still get to be at home a couple days remote, a couple days in person. But I think, and I did feel like social support wise, I had friends that were super supportive of keeping that slower pace. Cause I was being mindful of, hey, let's take this first month to really not do much. To go on walks, to allow my body to reacclimate, but I wasn't in a rush to get back to X, Y, or Z, like physically or work-based or even emotionally. So I think giving yourself that grace and space, especially in those first few weeks, they call it sometimes the 4th trimester for the baby, right? But that's also for you as a mom, not just for the baby's development, but for your own as well.
Yeah. Did you feel a lot of pressure to get back to doing things quickly, or did you feel like you knew enough at that point to be like, no, I'm going to take the time that I need to feel like I'm healed and healing before I'm jumping back into doing X, Y, and Z?
I think I had the time and space for most of the people. I think it just varies, right? Like people kind of have their own expectations and those are cast upon you. So you have to have the mindset with which to approach them and recognize their expectations don't have to dictate your actions.
That's so powerful. Can you repeat that one more time?
Someone else's expectations don't have to dictate your actions. I think knowing deeply what you desire in that season is really important. And I think I did. And I had a supportive partner. Like my husband was on board with it. And so, yeah, it was like we missed, and it's sad to me, we missed his brother's 21st birthday and his family was together, but it was like an hour drive and we were going to be at an outside restaurant. And Jacqueline was like 2 weeks old. And I was like, I'm not ready. I'm just not ready to navigate that. Breastfeeding still felt so new. I didn't feel like I wanted to throw a blanket on. I just still felt not, 2 weeks fully, you know, and that was okay. And our family was super receptive to it. But, you know, there's a photo of it. There's in a sweet little book that my mother-in-law made Jacqueline, and it's all of them together. So it's a cute little identifier of like, there's Uncle Otto, there's Auntie Alex. But it's like, oh man, we missed out on that, but it was my choice and I stuck by it. And so, yeah.
What were some of the physical things that you were experiencing postpartum? Did you have a lot of pain? Do you feel like it took you a long time to start making progress with your healing and getting back to feeling a little bit more like yourself?
That's good.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I was really grateful that with my vaginal delivery, I did not tear, which I was kind of shocked by. So that was awesome.
Yes.
But I still think there's so much. Like getting real with it, you go from the teeny tiniest to literal bagel. So there's a lot of recovery that has to happen with that. Yes. I think, there's fun diagrams. So check out the bagel ones. I think that probably bleeding wise was pretty discomforting. And your uterus, right, shrinking back down is something that women don't talk about. You don't talk about how you're still having contractions for quite a long while afterwards, and that's to literally shrink your uterus back down to its normal size. But I think, you just feel a little bit alien in your own body for a while, and that's okay, right? Yes. You're wrapping things in place. You're making sure things stay clean. I would not advise people to use a mirror in those first few weeks, right? Like not the time. You just... check out your face, make sure you've washed it, right? But not, don't check down there. I think there's just so much, that has to happen and you have to just let it happen. Yeah. But thankfully I feel like overall I didn't have as much pain. I would say, if you choose to breastfeed, like fed is best. I love breastfeeding. I love the power of breastfeeding, super passionate about it, but not navigating mastitis on your own is not fun. And figuring out like, is this worth going into the doctor because we're still in the height of the pandemic, right? And figuring those things out, I would say, but more so pelvic floors, all that stuff felt good enough in that season. Yeah.
So we started seeing each other you were about a year and a half postpartum by the time we started meeting. What were some of the things that initially piqued your interest in pelvic floor physical therapy, especially about a year and a half out? Right, it had been a little bit of time. What were you experiencing? What did you feel like you needed help with? What were some of your goals that we started focusing on?
What were my goals, Erica? I think, why then? I think that there had always been an interest for me. I think, total full disclosure, a lot of it was financial. So having just worked at a wonderful nonprofit, but then my husband's a pastor, we're just making it work. I was paying off grad school that I had been in. So it wasn't a priority in my mind. And then I think just got to a season where I'm like, okay, if we're wanting to have another kiddo in the next little bit, I want to feel at home in my body before inviting another person into that home to be grown and nourished and all the things. So I think I just realized, all right, before we try for a second, let's be mindful of a holistic integrated M. So I think that's what initiated it. I think that was a lot of my goal setting was, hey, I should be mindful that though I'm back to running, though I'm back to biking and walking and hiking and doing fun things actively, am I doing this well? Am I doing this with my new body well? Am I being mindful of, genetical things and being, let's strengthen this so that I also don't have to have knee surgery before 40 like my mom did, let's be intentional. And so I think it was a creation of it was just a next step. It was saying, I'm choosing me, and I'm choosing to be holistically integrated as I step into whatever the next season of me looks like.
Yeah, I love that. What were your big takeaways? What did you learn? What are you taking with you?
Oh, so much. Besides, Erica's just going to be bothered by me all the time because I have to talk to her at least a little bit here and there.
Anytime.
No, I think big takeaways. The first one is just in that initiation, I chose to be able to come and do the postpartum PT work, right? Like take time for yourself. So that's a big takeaway, is to continue to make time and space. I think in the simplicity of physical therapy exercises, some, yeah, sure, super complex, but a majority of, I think, the work that got to be done, I was surprised by, I can do this. I don't need to strive and strain for the most challenging thing. It's remember to start where you're at and progress from there, right? So even taking the simplicity of a core exercise that built 3 different times and to say, great, I now can do this. And I started with this. Remembering it's not like you're rewinding and backtracking. It's just, no, you're at this level and let's keep growing. So I think that's a big takeaway. For sure, we'll take all the exercises from it. No, but I think just even that mentality and that framework of whether it's 5 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day or anywhere in between, movement matters, and making intentional time to move your body. It just affects so much more. And that's time and space for yourself. No one can take that away. Yeah. And I think just that, again, it all is connected. So if our physical bodies are not, working well, it affects our mental status. It affects how we interact with the people around us. So,
is there anything that was surprising to you?
Anything that surprised me about physical therapy?
Yeah.
Okay. I think, thank you to Dr. Erica for making it such a simple experience and an environment that is comfortable. I think maybe women who are hesitant about it in terms of especially the internal pelvic floor work, depending on your upbringing, depending on your level of comfortability with the human body, I think it's just, that was surprising to me to be able to be like, no, I can. And that all comes from different, what's your framework of sexuality? So that's a whole other topic for a whole other day.
It's a deep one.
But I think I was surprised by, the ease with which I felt like, okay, I can work on this. Like, this is something great. We can do this. I think, this is another takeaway. Don't get comfortable with discomfort. Even if it's not pain, don't get comfortable with discomfort, whether it's pelvic floor wise, otherwise with your body. Like, do not just settle into, this is just, it's fine. Reminding yourself like, no, there could be something here to work on. But yeah, I think that surprised me, the comfortability with it. And I think I was genuinely surprised that in 8 weeks we were able to close my diastasis recti a significant amount. Like that to me was a little bit more, I was surprised. And the magic you work on the table, right? When I'm like, oh great, we somehow just moved my leg over and it wasn't moving before because we changed something in my rib. I don't know what you did. So I think that was sweet. I think the power of physical therapy was surprising to me.
Yeah. Did it surprise you at all that we spent a lot of time working on your hips and your back and how that related to your pelvic floor and your diastasis and other pelvic floor things that you originally came in for?
I think so. I think it made sense, but I think initially it was oh wait, okay, we're going to isolate work on that. Yeah. And then it affects this. When I think about my faith background, when I think about what I believe, there are scripture passages in the Bible that talk about the human body in relation to something cannot do something without something else, right? And so though it's meant as this idea of when we work together in community, there's this, I think there's a reason that's a metaphor. There's a reason that something in the body affects something else. So it's pretty cool, I would say that. Yeah. It wasn't crazy surprising, but I was like, yeah, this is awesome.
So connected.
Yeah.
Backtracking a little bit, you said one of the big takeaways that you had was taking the time to invest in yourself. Yeah. And I feel like this is probably the 4th interview I've done with one of my patients, and that's been a resounding theme across every single interview, is that it was a big step for that mom to take to put in the time, put in the resources to make that investment. But it was worth it. What would you say to a mom who's still on the fence and it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to take the time. Like, I don't know if I have the time or the money or whatever. There's so many different obstacles and barriers that can get in the way. What would you say to her?
Probably will get emotional.
That's all right.
I think you have to think, like, who do I want to become? Who do I want to be as a mom? Who do I want to be as a woman? Who do I want to be as a partner, regardless of your marital status? Who do I want to be as a friend? Because if you are not taking the time for yourself in whatever way it is, whether it's you love massages and you get one once a month, or you love reading and you just need that minute to read, at the end of the day, the world of motherhood, you will not have time. Like, you could always be doing something else for someone else, but we cannot pour from an empty cup. We have to invest in ourselves fully. And the financial bullet is one you have to consider. And, like, it's not the time and place and space for everyone in their seasons. But I would say it was 100% worth the investment. And if you can figure out a way to invest in yourself, like, that's the best investment you can make. What kind of mom do you want to be when you're 50, when you're 60, when you're 70? And will your body and your mind and your heart carry you there? Take the time to do it now so that you can.
Yeah. That's awesome. What would you say to a mom who just had a baby? She's fresh postpartum. What do you want her to know?
So many things. Come get coffee with me, or I'll bring you coffee. That's one of them. Is you're not going to know what you need, and that can feel really debilitating. Because if you have an awesome and strong support system, they'll constantly ask you, like, hey, what do you need? How are you doing? Find mamas who have recently gone through this, because they'll know exactly what you need, and just be like, tell me what I need, and then they'll do it. I think be kind to yourself. I think there is a whole person that just grew within you for 9 to 10 months, and also people don't know that. Hello, 40 weeks is not 9 months. Like, it takes at least that amount of time, if not more, to feel at home in your own body again without a sweet human growing within it. So I would say, I swear people told me this, and I guess you cannot fully comprehend until you experience it, but the amount of sleep deprivation is unlike anything I had ever experienced. So I think you have to be kind to yourself, because your mind is going to play tricks on you when you're up from 2 to 4 a.m. and no one else, it feels like, in the whole wide world is, and you're trying to get this baby to fall back to sleep, or sleep at all. And I think there are wars that can be played, I think, in our minds, for sure, internally, like in that season. So just be kind to yourself and remember that newborn stage, it is fleeting, even though each day feels like a year. It'll pass. You've got this. You can do it. And find those places you can be fully vulnerable, because you're carrying so much, you're doing so much for so many.
Yeah. I love that. Beautiful. Last question. You're hopefully, Lord willing, hoping to have another one. Yeah. What are you taking with you that you want to carry into your next pregnancy, your next postpartum journey? What do you feel like you've learned and that you want to do differently, or just take with you into that new experience? Because every pregnancy is different.
Everyone is so different. I think that, like, knowing, like, shedding expectations for myself of it being even a resemblance of the first one. I mean, it won't. We're not in the same status of pandemic. Yeah. Hopefully monkeypox doesn't take off. Well, anyways, I think a lot of what I'll take away is a bit more of that cherishing, right? Like, with a second, you've got this sweet little loved one you already have, and then you're trying to soak it in, but you're also probably not checking your tracker of the baby is the size of a orange, like that's, but I think so I guess what I mean by soaking it all in is, like, I think I'll be more intentionally aware of my body this time around. Not that I was neglecting what I was putting into it, or moving and all that stuff. I think I just have better tools in my toolbox to be able to navigate. That's the best way to say it. And then especially when I think about, that postpartum work as well, like literally tools in my toolbox. But I think I hope to go into the next season of expectancy, whenever that might be, with less expectation than the previous. Just hold it loosely and to let it come as it may. Yeah.
It's a hard thing to learn. I feel like with any area of life.
Hands down.
But man.
Yeah. And I know sometimes people like talk about comparison being the thief of joy, which I totally agree with. But I think from a lot of my relationships, I've constantly learned, like, expectation is. I think when you come in with whether they're unsaid or something that is just so built up in your mind, it'll just rob you from the true joy you can find with relinquishing them. So
being present.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
allowing
me the privilege of working with you over the past couple months. And I feel like we've really gotten to know each other, and it's just been so fun to just hear about your journey and watch close up the progress that you've made. And I can just sense so much more of like a confidence too, with just your body and what you're capable of. And I know that you've empowered a lot of other women to take the time to invest in themselves and ask questions and advocate for themselves. And I think it's really important. So thanks for setting such a good example of that.
Of course. Thanks for working with me.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Catch us next time on Project Pelvic Health. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. I hope you felt encouraged and that you learned something new. If you've been enjoying listening to Project Pelvic Health, would you mind just taking a minute to rate and review, as well as maybe share it on your social media and subscribe to make it a little bit easier for other mamas to find us? We would so appreciate that. We'll see you next time on Project Pelvic Health.